All right, Jessica, here we go. I'm ready to do this. So we've been talking about doing this now for probably at least, for sure, a year, roughly, right?
At least.
If not longer. I think it started with...
If not longer.
I think it probably started with me telling you need to do a podcast.
Yes.
And then you probably told me, you have too much going on or something like that. But you didn't want to do one up on your own, I guess, yet. But...
All of this is why.
All of the setup.
All of this.
No, it is a lot. And that's funny when people, I think it's become kind of almost like when people used to say, start a blog. People are like, start a podcast.
Yes.
Except it's not
that easy.
Not the same as
No.
just having a domain,
No.
having a website.
No. I feel like most things are logistics. If you can understand the logistics, then, maybe you can move forward. I do not understand the logistics, so I have not moved forward until now.
Well,
so thank you.
And you get to do it with someone who can handle that side of it. So,
Absolutely.
But when I've took a pause from the podcast I didn't look back at the date, but it's probably been 2 years, if I had to guess. And I wrestled with the idea, do you start over or, it's been so long, why even do the same thing? But I kept thinking about the phrase that you had told me at some point in one of our sessions dealing with something, where I felt like, I don't want to quit this. And whether that was a relationship or an endeavor with work, you just said, it's not no forever, it's no for right now. And I know there are times for complete closure to something, but for me with this podcast, that was what kind of something I kept going back to was, okay, it was no for right now. Because it's something that means a lot to me. Hearing people's stories is just something that brings life to me. And then on top of that, when I would do shows where I have to research topics and learn something new, that for me gave me a chance to really practice that curiosity that I feel like is natural in me, but gave me a creative outlet to do it. And so those words, though, it's not no for ever, it's no for right now, are why I decided I want to do it under the same umbrella of Fight for Brilliance, but I want to build upon it now. And that's something else that you helped me kind of think about, which is
you're evolving. So why can't your podcast and your creative work evolve?
Yeah. You're not always starting over from scratch.
Yeah.
And that's a hard concept to kind of come to peace with, I think, sometimes when you quit and then get back at it.
Yeah. Or take a break.
Or there you go. Or take a break. So you're already reframing my language.
I am.
And that's why I'm excited about this with you, because that is what I get to experience all the time in those sessions with you. But I knew that when I relaunched, I wanted to do it differently, and I wanted to have a portion of this really focused on the mental health aspect. And instead of me trying to pretend like I'm the expert, or me even trying to decipher the things that I read and learn through just my own lens, I thought, what a great way to change the format, also bring awareness to what the relationship kind of looks like, even between client and therapist, by having the conversations with you around topics. And so I think that's one of the things that, for me, I don't know if this will necessarily change some of the stigma for people, but what I know I came into therapy with the mindset of was, this is about going in and getting fixed. And I don't know if we've talked about this, but when I first sat down with you, it was at a time where the marriage was on the rocks. It was looking like divorce for sure, which is where it ended up inevitably. But, I sat there not with a smile, not saying, what do I have to learn?
There was an intensity.
Is that how you describe it? How would you describe what I was like when I came in, actually? I'm curious.
I think there was fear.
Yeah.
And so the intensity, to me, I interpret it as the fear. And you had a very strong stance of, I think you've said it, I don't know if I can remember exact words, but it was, if you can't give me the answers, then why am I here? Basically, right?
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like, on the spot. And then I remember taking a pause and then also turning it back around on you pretty quickly And we were one-on-one at that point. And I think I said, well, I don't know. Why are you here?
Did I even have an answer for you at that time?
No. But I think being as direct with you as you were with me, I think it opened something up for you.
Well, so that wasn't my first time going to therapy. And the difference though was, most of the time when you and this is probably a whole episode in itself at some point, but when you go to therapy, usually it starts in crisis mode, right? For a lot
especially for couples.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where we were. Right. Mm-hmm. And so even in my life and past times where I've gone to any therapy would have been in crisis mode of some sort. But so I think for me to show up, and usually when you're in crisis mode, people are very tender with you.
They tread lightly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And your personality is one that is strong and has an intensity to it that can be interpreted as like, I need to now be defensive or have a defensive posture.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was in that moment, but I could feel that in order to maybe build rapport or have you trust me, you needed to know that you didn't actually have to be there.
Yeah.
That it was still your choice to be there. I wasn't sitting in the chair looking at you and saying, these are all the things that are wrong with you.
Yeah.
I'm over here analyzing and going to prescribe, this problem that ends with you being the problem. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think I remember it very vividly. Remember the office I was in. I remember all of that. And it's been a very rewarding, client therapist relationship from my perspective to see the shifts,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think too, for me, it was that you helped me see it differently, where you started with it being my choice. Mm-hmm. And the whole time, have I worked with you now 5, maybe 6 years?
Oh my gosh.
Probably.
I don't remember. I remember when I was at the office there in Lovett, I'd had my first child and I was maybe I don't know if I was pregnant at the time, but that's kind of what I go back to. And she's about to be 7. So it's probably like 7.
Yeah.
Years.
It's let's just call it 6. I mean, it's been long enough where what started though 6 years ago, let's say, as a choice to be there and for an opportunity for me to look inward has remained the same. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've come to terms with and actually learned to really appreciate about this process. And so anyway, I knew that, you've been somebody you've navigated everything from, my divorce to you've helped me navigate decisions with shifting in my business to even why I'm sitting here doing this podcast to give me some of that creative confidence again. And especially with parenting and some difficult situations, even in co-parenting. Mm-hmm. And so every dynamic of my life, even here at, in my 40s, even dating again.
I was about to say.
Yeah, I know you were hoping.
Are you going to put that one out there?
Hesitant to put that one out there, but it's out there. But you've helped me navigate all aspects of life, and the relationship has changed. And it's not often crisis. It's oftentimes just
inquiry, discovery.
Yeah. I ask questions for a living in my business.
Sure.
Like that's how I create solutions. Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting to have that switch where it's like, you're the one helping me see maybe through a different lens, maybe pause on that email that I want to send back out of anger and instead seeing, hey, what do you need to solve in this? What will you do by responding that way? So everything from responses to approaches and mindsets, I just knew if there's any way we can pull this off and actually have conversations together, I knew it'd be meaningful for us probably to begin with. And even if it's just that, great. If it's an exercise in creativity and just doing something, great. But also I do hope that, this isn't something where it has to be everyone gets answers for how to live their life, because you've never been one to even talk to me about, this is the answer for how to live your life, other than really like you get to choose.
Yeah, I'm still searching for it myself. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is, I think people can listen in on something like this and sometimes have this idea of, okay, cool. It's, somebody who I would perceive as an expert because they have a title.
Sure.
And so I think let's just disarm that right away. And I don't know about you, but for me, I hope it's dialogue that we have, and maybe somebody hears something differently, sees it through, their own lens of their own life differently.
Sure.
And maybe it just causes them to ask, a question.
Absolutely. Just like we were talking about, like, what's the purpose? Like, what would be success? And to me, success is there something we say or talk about that just causes one person to just go, huh? Or I didn't think about it that way. Or from that question, now here's another question. Yeah. So it's just, to me, that's success, right? That's just opening up conversation. So, yeah.
All right. Well,
and this is not therapy.
This is not therapy. Let's be clear. This is not my therapy session. Let's be very clear about that. And that's one of the things we talked about, and I guess it's even worth sharing just so people do have a good perspective of this. And even the dynamic here is, there are things that I work with you on. Right now we're meeting monthly. We used to meet weekly, sometimes twice a month. And now the consistency has been a monthly session. And in those sessions, that's my time to dig into my own life with you. If anything inside of this gets brought up, it's probably something that we've already navigated a long time ago.
Sure.
It's probably not even directly related to...
Or you can edit it out.
Yeah, or I can edit it out. If I was like, hey, I have to ask you this real quick. Put me on the clock.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll take a commercial break. But this isn't a therapy session for me. And also, it's not that you're here to give somebody clinical advice either.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. We've been very intentional and call it like boundaried about the setup.
Yeah.
And over a lot of conversations about what this would mean, how we would navigate it. What if certain things showed up? Unfortunately and fortunately, as a therapist, there are lots of rules and laws and ethics and all of that. And so I don't take that lightly.
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot of people in my profession that may be like, I would absolutely never, ever, 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 ever do that. And I've, maybe that's another conversation in and of itself. But I think we've really gone through a lot of the what if scenarios and talked through it so that we could just say, hey, just like everything else, it's going to be imperfect. And maybe there is something that can come out of it that is fruitful in that imperfection. Yeah. And I trust too that we can navigate that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I agree. That's super important. We have spent a lot of time talking through how does this protect me as a client? How does this protect you as a professional? And so, we're trying to navigate that with precision, even like from that standpoint. And I think we're off to the right start, at least with that.
Absolutely.
I will say we had talked about this a long time ago, but it's been fun to see things like Stutz and show up on
Absolutely.
TV. When I saw that, I think I texted you right away. I said, have you seen Stutz? And I don't know if you had at the time, but I was like,
I hadn't.
That dynamic.
Yes. And it's a profound documentary. If you haven't heard of it or seen it, watched it, honestly, like that, I think that's an important thing to talk about, that the media or Hollywood or, there's been these depictions of therapists. They're all over the map, right? There's a lot of unethical ones out there. And there's some that are now, I think, making therapists more human. Yeah. We are human, right? But anyways, in Hollywood and in the media and all these movies, therapists are depicted in all these different ways. And so I think it's the right time to, for things like Stutz, or is it Shrinking?
Yeah.
Is it Shrinking on Apple TV? I still haven't watched that yet, but I probably had like a handful of clients bring that up in session. I just like laughed myself because I'm sure there's a lot of accuracy in it too, but I also know that it's kind of like a little bit over the top. But
it's very over the top.
Yes, like most, things are. So I think it's a great time in what's going on with the world, what's happened in the past, call it 3 years, right? Therapy world is changing. I think clients are looking for more approachable, relatable, conversational work with their therapist. And more clients are coming and asking harder questions. I will also say that. And wanting answers, having the sense of urgency for answers, because life is happening in the now. And what all compounded since the pandemic is sometimes unbearable for people, or you feel like it's overstimulating, it's overwhelming, it just becomes too much. So we either run the risk of avoiding, suppressing, which then, builds anxiety, depression, mental health issues, or we want an answer, want the fix, want the way out, the pathway through. And unfortunately, there's no one way. And at the same time, with I think an honest, authentic understanding of what therapy is, what this work really is, and what it really means, if we can model that or show pieces of that, even in just our existential, questions of life, then I feel like, one, we're meeting people where they are, but also we're not colluding with this need to find a fix. To the problem, and then prescribe the problem and over-focus on the problem. Do they exist? Yes. And are there sometimes biological, genetic, biochemical, like things like that are going on that we don't know about? Sure. And a lot of times it's just the function of being in the world the way that it is now, that I think people have a misunderstanding of, well, it must have anxiety, or I must have depression, or I must have this bipolar disorder, or I must have this, or I must have that, just so that it pinpoints the problem, so then I can, I don't know.
Yeah. Because it's an answer. Like without that, there's confusion.
Sure. Right? It's an answer. It could be a way to deflect. It could be a way to buffer too. And I say this with a lot of awareness that mental health, like disorders do exist. Right. I'm not trying to say that they do not. But there's a lot now where you can just go out, get on TikTok, get on Instagram, a reel, a podcast. You can digest this information so quickly and then prescribe the problem. Based on, I can relate. Well, guess what? Most of us can all qualify for like at least some of the criteria for a lot of the disorders listed in the DSM. It's our clinical diagnostical manual, right? But you don't meet all of them, right? So anyways, all this to say, I think there's a fascination with the field of therapy and this like lack of understanding as well that adds to the stigma. And I 100% believe that the clinicians, the mental health professionals, we are also responsible for that stigma and how it has continued.
Well, also, I would add a layer to that where it's not just I'm seeing something to diagnose myself with. Okay, like basically social media has become the WebMD for. Absolutely. Well, my boyfriend's a narcissist, right, or exactly. Well, I changed my mind. I have BPD. But it's become sort of a WebMD for trying to diagnose ourselves.
Sure.
And shortcut the process of figuring out what the hell is actually going on in our lives. And then probably more dangerously is not that we're giving ourselves this, death sentence from it, but we're instead taking these sound bites or these posts and we're treating them as the antidote, that this is medicinal for us, for our lives. And I mean, even you are hesitant, I think, with me sometimes because you're aware to know that, you have a broader view of situations through a lot of different lenses of people's lives, but it's hard to remove our own biases like completely from solutions.
Sure.
It's easier to, that's why you ask questions. It's easier to remove biases when you ask questions. And a lot of the advice out there is not in the form of a question. It's,
It has more of a definitive feel to it. Or
yeah. And, each of us are our own expert in our own experiences, right? And so even a therapist with the best intention, even you sitting here with the best intention,
absolutely,
might say something. I might say something in the content I put out that can seem that it's, an antidote, but it's really, the danger is to just take someone for their word instead of taking the word and applying it to your life and seeing, does it fit?
Sure.
Because it doesn't have to.
Doesn't have to.
Doesn't have to.
Yeah.
So.
And I would say that I feel like that's what you're really good at too, is sometimes I say things just to hear you say, no, that's not it. Right? Because I mean, if I give you an answer, if I give you a thought and it doesn't fit exactly, or it's just, I don't know, it's a miss in some way. Like, you will acknowledge it. You'll be like, no, that's not it. And every once in a while I'll be like, there's a piece of that in there that's probably true, because my ego can also want to be right. But at the same time, it gets you what it's not. Sometimes the question or even the statement, or I don't know, checking in about it, gets you to say, no, that's not it. But it puts you on a path to say, wait, maybe this is a little bit more what I was trying to say. So I feel like you're really attuned to the meaning behind language or words, or is it accurate or not accurately describes what it is that you're going through, right?
Well, I probably drive you nuts sometimes with that too, though, because I'm like, I don't think that's the right word for right now.
Yeah, but it's kind of refining too, because it also, again, brings to light like that something could mean one thing for me, but it could mean something very different for you.
Yep.
Or even just a nuance in there can throw it off. So I feel like what gets dangerous for therapists, or even I guess from my own vantage point in the work that I do, is if I have an assumption, if I have a explanation, even in what we call conceptualizing the work that we do with our clients, if I'm not curious, and if I'm not, at least recognizing that, a good percentage of where I'm sitting in that room, in that chair, right? Am I holding space for curiosity? And if I'm not, then that's my indicator to know there's something there. There's something either to explore in my own therapy, in my own coaching, in my own writing, or whatever, or there's a question to ask. There's something to bring into the conversation that we're having to see, is it maybe something intuitively that I'm picking up as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
No, and those are all things that I think you're also good at, and that's why I've enjoyed. Actually, I can say this now. I came in with my arms probably crossed to the first session with you.
Yeah, you were. What is it? cynical? You weren't even skeptical. You were cynical.
Just like, this is for the birds.
Here's my armor.
I think I probably at many points have told you like, this is bullshit. You ever remember hearing me say that to you? Probably.
Absolutely.
So that's how
you stayed.
I did.
But you stayed and you asked the question, and you've always been honest in whatever was going on. And that holds so much value. You weren't afraid to just say what you were feeling in the moment. And so what maybe I do, or maybe what someone else might do, is just kind of hold that and push it down, or not really recognize, oh, I have this feeling and that doesn't really feel right, but I'm just going to, whatever it is, listen, not say anything. I'm hesitant because I don't know what it is exactly.
Yeah.
But you will extrovert that. You will say it if you don't know what it is. And that's almost like that's your go-to. And so I really appreciate that as just being authentic. Like, that's what the whole process of therapy is. It's just you and your authenticity showing up, right?
Yeah.
And you're the expert. You know what you're going through. I can't sit in a chair and go, this is your problem. But this is what's wrong with you. Nobody'd ever come back. I don't know. And I think that does happen because it's a very unique profession to be a helper, to be attuned, to be sensitive, to hear stories, and to be exposed to people's pain. and at the same time feel like, well, if I'm hearing it, I must need to be the one to do something about it. And I think what gets missed, like where the magic is in the active, like I'm here, I'm holding this space for you to share what's on your mind, your heart, what's going on right now.
Yeah.
It's right now. It's all in the moment, right?
Yeah.
And so even if I'm thinking about what I'm going to say to you next, I'm not present.
Yeah.
I'm not present to what's occurring. And so that's probably what can be frustrating about the pace with me at times is it takes a lot to be that active and listening that I'm not always thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I am sometimes, I'm going to be honest. But I know when that happens, I'm most likely going to miss something.
Like you said, I mean, I think that's you might give me credit for showing up authentically, but that's also what I hope people see even and hear through our conversations is maybe not every therapist and client relationship is like this where there's good dialogue. But I just hope if anything they see there's benefit to having somebody else's perspective on the things in life that we're navigating. And so we're not going to dive into, necessarily specific things in, let's say, my life, but we're going to even take some broad topic things and just look at those both through our own lenses. And to me, you said something earlier too, that it is a profession where there's a mystery around it because it is so private and you can't unveil. We couldn't put in cameras in a session and turn that into a documentary probably, right? I mean, even Jonah...
You have to sign lots of waivers.
Lots of waivers. Even Jonah Hill, I mean, you're seeing...
Yeah, and honestly, I will also say, too, that it is I hold it in, like, with utmost respect, the conversations, the work that I do with clients.
Yeah.
That even if you're consenting to a conversation with me on air... There's things you're not aware of or I'm not aware of that you haven't consented to yet, right? So I held that with this like high esteem that the trust that is the most important, right? And so we don't always know what's going to come up or how it's going to feel until afterwards. So, yeah.
Well, I'm just glad that we're able to try to tackle this. And I think just full disclosure for everyone that ever listens, that this is you and I both also seeing what happens, right? There's not really a lot defined other than a little bit of a path so that we both make sense because we can probably go off on tangents.
Absolutely.
But other than that, it is as much for us to figure out sometimes in process of this as it is about having something figured out and saying, here we are, we know what we're talking about. There's probably going to be times where we might even second guess what we say inside of an episode and change. And so I just hope that there can be a fluid conversation that changes maybe perspective because that's been, to me, versus the idea of having to fix things in my life, the benefit has just been helping me ask different questions in my life.
Absolutely.
More than anything. And I know there's times for serious, intervention, whether it's someone's trauma that they've gone through versus just navigating the ups and downs, ebbs and flows of life, which is probably what we navigate more, now. And so probably most of our conversations are geared toward navigating the ebbs and flows of everyday life. And
tackling some hard life questions.
Yeah. Yep. So we're going to see what happens. And I'm just grateful to be doing this with you.
Me too.